Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Academia Podcast. My name is Todd. I'm the host of the show from the Warp Zone Studios, deep in the heart of central Minnesota. It is Saturday, February 6th, 2021, and I have a little bit of stuff for you today. First of all, I had tried to record a video yesterday, and as I was editing said audio, the microphone was on mute the entire time. So I did not have enough time to re-record, and so now you get a Saturday special. So apologize for being a day late, but never a dollar short. If you are tuning in for the first time, this is the Academia Podcast. We are your voice for school choice, and we promote a Christian education, a liberty education, Austrian economics, or free markets, if you will, and basically an overall commentary on school choice. You will hear a lot on this show, a lot of criticisms about public schooling, but I just want to encourage you this morning that if you are a parent that has a son or daughter in public school, I don't want to bash you in your choice. I just simply ask a step forward, and everybody as a parent, we can always do a little bit more to be more engaged with what they're learning. I was certainly a product of public school, and I feel like I turned out just fine. But there was a lot of unlearning to do and a lot of learning to do. I had taken the red pill, if you will, if you've seen The Matrix, and I had to opt out from a lot of different things that I had learned, especially in the areas of history, economics, and just an overall approach to how it's done. So I'm going to continue to provide that insight as we go along. We are up and running on our 15th episode, so congratulations if you've hung out, stood up with us. We definitely appreciate your support. The next week, starting Monday, we'll be going over this book. If you can see it, it's called The Gifts and Ministries of the Holy Spirit by Lester Sumrall. It is going to be a empowering read about a biblical model of the Holy Spirit in our lives and the giftings that He has given us and the ministries that He's given us. Regardless of what you've been taught, this is from a biblical standpoint, and we will take full advantage of what it has to say, because one of the main points of our show is that we deliver a Christian education to our children. But also, we want to make sure that we're sharp ourselves. That's why I have devised a book reading list. So if you have developed a book reading list, I just want to applaud you. I think that there's something about it that helps you stay accountable. I've had a dusty collection of books for many years. I've acquired books, and a lot of them never have been read because I have never given myself timelines just to get them done. This year is going to be different. So if I'm going to be developing a curriculum for my kids, I believe it starts with me. I got to develop a curriculum for myself. I have to find out where I need to stretch and where I need to grow. And so I devised a book reading list of 52 books that I believe that would be very important for a liberty education, a Christian education, and sound money and free markets. If you want to see where that book reading list is, you can go to our website at warpzoneu.com/list. And it's not like YOU, it's just like the letter U, warpzoneu.com/list. Today, though, however, I will be getting into some of the fiction that I've been reading and talking about just some of the main points, I guess, of how you can still learn a lot through fiction reading and why I believe it's still necessary for an education as well. I mean, reading is a subject, there's libraries full of books. And so we can learn a lot from ones that are nonfiction, and we can't simply just argue that fiction's a waste of time because it's not true. There's so much beyond the pale with that statement. Well, the main reason why I wasn't able to record in the morning yesterday was because I was called in to go a little bit early to my main job. And if those that you don't know, that I do prepare taxes right now, and if you know anything about taxes, we're in tax season. And so I am helping people out get their money back from Uncle Sam. And I think it'd be kind of ironic because I do believe in the soundness of money that we'll be talking about more this year, that I do believe that there's a way to function in society without any taxation at all. I believe that, we could have usury fees, consumption fees, membership fees, things like that to operate the varying cost of a state or a society without a state. I do want to advocate that. I believe that it's possible to have a state so small that you don't even know that it exists and is more of an arbitrator rather than as a governing body. I believe that's possible. I don't know if we'll ever get there. I feel like it's more of a utopia on my end. But today I will be sharing a few pieces of information I believe that are vital. I've seen a lot of clients already this year. There's been a lot of questions going around, especially with the changes that happened over the last year and how it affects people in their tax situation. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those because you might be wondering as well. First of all, I'll talk about stimulus. Over the last year, if you hadn't known, there were 2 stimulus packages passed. Even though the second one was in 2021, it is being calculated on 2020's tax return. The first one was given around April, and that amount had $1,200 per adult, and it had $500 per child. And then the second one that went around was in January, but it is once again being calculated on the 2020 tax return, and that was $600 per person regardless. So one thing that they're doing with the taxes in the stimulus is they're issuing what's called a recovery rebate credit. So if you did not get your stimulus checks over the last year, you can certainly do so by filing your taxes, and you will go ahead and get that credit above the line. It's not being counted in with your income, and it is not taxed. So that is a plus. If you had not received it when you do your taxes, you'll be able to get it through your refund. Now, there's 2 peculiar instances where certain individuals are awarded a double stimulus, and some will walk away without any stimulus regardless of their situation. The people that will be getting a double stimulus are those children that are being claimed on between every odd and even year. So let's say, for instance, that you claimed, a daughter in 2020, but then the mother gets to claim in odd years, 2019, 2021. Now, what happens with that is that mom would have gotten the first stimulus because it worked off of 2019's tax year. Now, since dad gets to claim the daughter in 2020, the daughter also would be getting a recovery rebate credit through their father. So, with that being said, I have dug at this ad nauseum to see where the ethics in this lie. I don't believe it's truly ethical for someone to be receiving 2 stimuluses on the same social security number, and to find out that they're going to allow it to go through without any type of recourse. So if you're out there and you're not married and you're both and you are in a relationship and you have children together, and you file your taxes separately, it may be more advantageous for you if you allow your significant other, the other parent, to claim the child this year, because if you had received taxes or stimulus for your children last year, then the other person that claims them this year would be getting more stimulus. So let's say, you're not married, but you have 4 kids, and you and all your kids received the stimulus. So now what would happen is that if you let the father, claim the 4 children this year, he could get all that money back, and the IRS wouldn't even bat an eye. So once again, I don't think it's the most ethical thing out there, but the IRS really doesn't care at this point. But then the other issue here would be that there are certain individuals that will not get it regardless. So if you are still living at home and you're a dependent over the age of 17, most likely your parents did not get a stimulus for you if you're still a dependent at home. So like if you're a college student or you just haven't moved out yet, or they're paying over half of your household support in terms of utilities and rent or mortgage, then basically speaking, let's say you're a 22-year-old just lives at home and you're still working out of home, you're not a college student, you didn't get a stimulus last year because your parents still claim he's a dependent. Well, I'm sorry to say it, there's not going to be any stimulus for you. Same thing goes if you are a college student living at home. There's not going to be any stimulus for you through the recovery rebate credit. And this one is probably the bigger kicker that kind of kicks me in the ribs, is that if there's an adult that's disabled at home, will also not get a stimulus. So all those being pushed through the recovery rebate credits will not push through those funds. So that's just the way how it is. I mean, that's the way how the IRS set it up this year. And so we've had a lot of questions. Some people are disgruntled over that idea, and some people are kind of ecstatic that the idea that they could be getting second stimuluses through their kids, that basically is going to be audit proof at this point. Second piece of information is there's going to be over $300 above the line in terms of credits awarded back to you if you gave cash contributions to a charity. So this could be your church, this could be, like a Feed the Hungry type of website or Red Cross, anything like that. If you'd given over $300 in the year, you can get that money back. Heck, if you've given $1 to an organization, you'll get that dollar back, but it's up to $300. Let's say you've given up to the point of 20% of your gross income to the kingdom of God. Praise the Lord. You're still at a point where it's not going to bring you any tax advantages, because you and your spouse are more than likely still going to take the standard deduction sitting around $24,000 roughly. And so there's not much of incentive to take a lower deduction, even though you gave that much. So let's say, like I said, let's say that you gave 20% of your income, and you and your spouse together jointly get $100,000 a year. Basically, you're sitting at a giving standpoint of $20,000. That way, you would need to dig up around $5,000 of additional deductions in order to be able to get that. And you can always do that, unreimbursed medical expenses, any type of traveling for medical travel for work that's outside of the workplace, or things like interest on the mortgage are all things that you could use in terms of itemizing. But it's really going to be an issue to try to see how that would calculate to get you over the $25,000. And that's probably one of the better things I think that Donald Trump did, would be that getting that standard deduction doubled certainly makes it more simple to pass things through. But the only issue is that then you get people that, couples that don't give $1, to their church, and then you get people that give 20% to their church, and it compares them on the same standard for in terms of a tax refund. But at the same, deductions, the same type of, it's just kind of baffling to me. But I guess the good part about that is that more and more people are getting their money back. I'm not always a big fan of above the line credits, because I've seen people that have gotten $400 throughout the entire year that you can't justify really that you're making your own. You're covering your own expenses throughout the year, and then you get $12,000 in earned income credits for you and your 3 kids. It's a hard time for me to justify that sort of thing's okay. I think it would be better off to see a situation where the income is going up. There's less of a refund, but then you're paying yourself more throughout the entire year. I think that's going to be more empowering for you as an individual rather than just relying on a government check once a year. So then the third thing, once again, the first thing I covered was stimulus, the recovery rebate credits. The second thing would be the $300 charity above the line credit that can come back to you. And then the third thing is going to be a exemption of penalties if you've withdrawn early distributions from a traditional IRA, Roth IRA, or traditional, Roth IRA, traditional IRA, and 401k. Sorry, guys, I have not had my coffee yet this morning. It is 6 a.m. It's Saturday. No one is open right now, and I did not feel like brewing coffee this morning. I'm trying to give you this podcast uncaffeinated, and going off of the points that I had yesterday. Yesterday I was a lot more bubbly, and I had a lot more woo factor, but I'm trying to give you the main points regardless anyways, because I want to be consistent. I want to keep delivering to you this content. So once again, continuing with the retirement distributions, if you're under the age of 59 and a half and you've taken funds throughout the last year, and all you got to say was corona related, you don't have to prove it. You just say I believe it's a 5912 form. Don't quote me on that. I don't have my office computer in front of me, but one thing that you can do is that you just put a 1 next to the line that says 10%, what amount of 10% of penalties did you receive. You just put a 1 there, and then basically when you get to the point where the reason codes, you just put other, and they want to know what other is, you just say CARES Act exemption, and that's all that they're going to look into. And basically what that will do is that will get you to the point on line 23, page 2 of your 1040. It will make sure that it doesn't calculate any type of penalties for an early withdrawal. So normally there's going to be a 10% penalty for you to pay on that. If it's a traditional type of retirement, then those are pre-tax dollars. So basically speaking, it's just going to be that 10% penalty waived. But then in terms of Roth, since it was post-tax dollars, you will have to include that as income as well. So that's a cool thing, is that you can be exempt from any type of penalties. You can also get a $300 above the line credit for any type of giving that you did over the year in cash, and then also recovery rebate credits as well. Basically speaking, if you didn't get your stimulus at all, you can get it through the tax return. So those are the three biggest questions, the three biggest changes that we've seen. Once again, starting Monday, we'll be going over this book, Gifts and Ministries of the Holy Spirit. I was going to cover a little bit of it this week, but I wanted to make sure that I was giving it its due diligence throughout the read. I don't want to simply rush and get through the book to stay on a time frame. And believe it or not, I'm ahead of my time schedule, which is crazy. I've been reading more books this year than I think I ever have. And I've been plugging away. I've been getting through it, and we're already done with 6 books on the traditional line of reads. And then when it comes to fiction, I'm almost done with my 3rd book. I've read The Hobbit, I've read Ender's Game, and now I'm on Ender's Shadow. And I have that lovely little book right here. La 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 la. And I'll be talking a little bit about that today. And before that, I will not be talking about the sponsor of our show because I don't have one right now. We solely rely on the donations, and so this is a startup podcast. So once in a while, I'll get a sponsor over at some websites. I'm trying to solicit our product to be able to bring to you, I guess, some of their types of products and services, I guess, if it's in step with what's going on with the show. But as of right now, there's no sponsor. So basically, we rely 100% on your donations. So if you go to our website, warpzoneu.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, click the yellow button that says donate, and it will lead you through a prompt to be able to give securely with a debit credit card. You can also go to paypal.me/warpzoneu, or you can go to Cash App at cash.app/$, cash tag. warpzoneu.com. So if you have Cash App, ours is hashtag warpzoneu, PayPal, warpzoneu. You can help us out, support the show. Definitely appreciate that. Definitely helps us out with some of the basics here. We want to expand our reach. We want to expand just our ability to be able to get stuff to you. We've expanded our equipment a little bit, and I definitely, know 100% that's solely funded off of the support that you provide to us as listeners. So we thank you for that very much. So moving along, basically we've read The Hobbit. That is a fantasy read in the genre of fantasy, whereas the Enders series is going to be more science fiction. So this is the second book, and we're going to be going through all the Enders this year. And I've talked to some folks before saying, and I really like the book. This is my second time reading the first two books of Ender's Shadow. I've read Speaker for the Dead, which is the sequel to Ender's Game, and then I've read the original Ender's Game book. So I'm going to see the other ones because I have an uncle that told me, he's like, have you read Children of the Mind yet? That's by far one of my favorite books I've ever read. And knowing that I haven't gotten that far in the series made me want to resurface some of the stuff that I haven't read in a long time and then just get back to reading it, because Orson Scott Card is just a genius. He really is. And I've talked to someone that suggested that they weren't a big fan of the Ender's Games books, and I could see why. I could see it not being a thing for everybody. I mean, some people would think it's a dry read. I certainly don't. I certainly think it's rich in terms of character development. I think it's really rich in terms of dialogue. It's really rich in terms of the relationships between characters. And if I could summarize it in any type of description, it's just continual mental chess. I mean, the entire time. It's basically, it's a book about child prodigies. So if you kind of like that sort of thing, I mean, they have certainly existed in the real world. If you're not familiar with Mozart, he was certainly a child prodigy. He learned the piano and could play it masterfully by ear by like when he was 3 or 4, I believe. So this book is full of child prodigies. What's going on with this entire book series, and I'll explain it in a nutshell. Before I do, if you've seen the movie, you really can't compare it to the movie. The movie is trash. I have an audiobook here of Ender's Game Alive. It's like a dramatized form of the book. This is also trash. There are some cool parts about it. They do a fair job of casting. Some of the casting not so good. And when you have children that are the characters, and then you're casting 16 and 17-year-old people, and you can tell like the men's voice have done the drop, and then you're trying to have them be 6-year-old boys. It doesn't work. And especially with the movie, you have Ender Wiggin that's supposed to be 6 years old, and he's standing tall like a 17 or 18-year-old kid with no facial hair. It's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of a slap in the face to Orson Scott Card, who explicitly said, I don't want this a movie. And so Hollywood's like, let's make it a movie. It would have been better off as like an HBO series or like a Netflix series, because there's so much content in the books that they really raced it and did not give it its justice. And I've read books where I've thought, I said after the fact, I'm like, you know what, I actually like the movie better. One of them is the Maze Runner first movie. The rest of the movies I felt were trash. The first Maze Runner movie, I felt that was a lot better than the book. That's just where I was at. Maybe the director and maybe the screenwriter did a better job than the author. One thing about it, though, is this guy, Orson Scott Card, he tells a really good story. And you kind of want to be able to tell a good story if you're an author, right? And so what he'll do is he'll take a lot of different themes, a lot of different tropes, a lot of different main points that he's trying to convey, and he does it in such a covert way that you barely notice that he's doing it. He's actually a Mormon, and I'm certainly not a Mormon. If you were wanting me to really label myself anything, I would consider myself as a Pentecostal Christian. And I go to the River Church, and that is headed by Rodney Howard Brown. And I don't go to the one in Tampa. I go to the one in Hutchinson, and our pastor, David Blair, is the pastor there, and he's been underneath Rodney's wing for over 17 years. And so, but I don't know where that rabbit trail came from, but Orson Scott Card, he's a Mormon, but he does have, he does have ethics. He does have a lot of, Christian principles. He doesn't really get into a lot of Mormonism in his books, but he does talk a lot about different characters that have different types of belief structures. One of the main characters in Ender's Shadow here is a devout Catholic and talks about God all the time. And we get a lot. There's a lot of commentary about God. It makes you think about God, but it doesn't do it in a way where it gives you a bad taste in your mouth about God, like the Golden Compass, or what do they call it? His Dark Materials series. Yeah, the Golden Compass fantasy read I was not a fan of, just because it's basically it embraces atheism. I talked about in The Abolition of Man that any type of teaching is going to carry a virtue with it. There's no void in that. And C.S. Lewis does a great job. If you're curious to hear more about that, we talk about that in an earlier episode about The Abolition of Man. That you really get to a point where your virtues will carry through in your writing regardless. But Orson Scott Card has such a great way of being able to hide that and suppress it and get to the point where he gives a good impression of theology. He gives a good impression of Christianity, regardless if he's a Mormon or not. So, once again, he's just a good writer. And giving a good picture, he builds a world. Just like Tolkien built a world with a Lord of the Rings. You build a world, you have a finite place, and you put characters in it, you give them a complex story, you give them complex relationships, and then after you've done that building of the world, you can do a lot of things. You can push the narrative through. And he certainly does that. So what's happened in this book is that there is a certain alien race, and you're thinking already, oh, aliens, this is an alien book. Well, not really. Basically speaking, that's, the main type of conflict in it is that there was an alien race called the Formics, which would be a highly intellectual type of, like, butterfly mixed with bee mixed with ant, because they all have a hive mind. They all communicate through a hive queen, and so they cannot communicate with people. They can't communicate with people of the earth. So they travel from their planet, and after they get to the edge of our solar system, they get a scout ship from their fleet to go check out Earth, just because their own planet has run out of water, and they're just scouting the planet to see if there's any occupants there. They're not really going for war, but as soon as there's alien ships involved, the powers of the world dismantled, and they all centered around one central power, giving a hegemony to a trifecta of three people, basically suppressed any type of governance to be able to give three people power. And that would be a centralized figurehead called the hegemon, which is like the executive control over all of the world. And then there was the strategos, which is basically the commander-in-chief out in space. And then there was the polemarch, which was also basically a governor for anything related outside of Earth. So you get those three people together, and they've suppressed all type of law, and they see this scout ship coming, and they just annihilate the thing, right? Just no questions asked, because they can't communicate. They tried to communicate with it, no communication happened. Then they saw that there was a bunch of stuff going on the outskirts of the solar system, so they send a bunch of fleet out there, destroy that as well. And so what's going on here in this book is that they're training a bunch of child prodigies to be able to believe that they are creating a type of system in place where they're going to war, but inside the children's minds that they are just running simulations like a giant video game, and they're controlling all this stuff from afar through remote, And what happens is that at the end, they do a lot of significant damage, basically bringing about a genocide to a race of Formics, and they didn't know that they were actually at war. They were just running simulations, and they were using artificial intelligence from the time that they were about 6 or 7 to be able to get them to see where their mind's going and which ones were the best fit for command and all these other types of stuff. And it's a really good read. There's a lot of interesting moral issues, whether conscription is, a moral thing or not, and if you bringing children into the army at a young age to basically programming them from cradle to the grave is another issue. But then you get a lot of jockeying, and basically speaking of, jockeying for position of who's alpha male. Obviously, Ender Wiggin is the one that is the guy that is promoted, and you get people that are jealous. You get people that are envious and just outright mad. The fact that someone's younger than them and maybe physically less capable is using lots of mental chess to be able to gain leverage over different people. So it's very interesting to see what's going on in the mind. Once again, this is the Ender's Game audiobook. I prefer listening to the real book or reading the real book because they cut out about 4 hours of dialogue and about 4 hours of just mental processes of the characters, and those are vital things. It's like trying to watch a theatrical version versus the extended version. The extended version is just always the way to go, right? And so what's kind of cool about this book series is that, as an example, is that there are 2 different book series in tandem together. So you get Ender's Game at the start, and then you get over here, you get sorry, I'm trying to use my webcam to be all visual, and it's just not working. So you get Ender's Game over here on the left, and then you get Ender's Shadow on the right. These are the same story told from 2 different points of view, and it does it in such a way where you don't have to read one first or the other. He does it in such a brilliant way. He calls it a parallax, and it's really neat to see him develop those characters in such a way that you could read both books to find out what's going on in both different characters as that goes on. So Ender's Game is the protagonist is Ender Wiggin. Basically his name's Andrew Wiggin, but ever since he was a baby they called him Ender. And then over on the other side, on Ender's Shadow, it's about a boy by the name of Julian Delphiki, who they call Bean. And he's less overt than Ender is, and he does things more in a covert way. So if you want to read one about, really it's about political, theater. It's a political thriller about how you play mental chess just about every single where you go. Every situation that you're in, every social situation that you're in, the overt issues that you do to portray who you are and the image of who you are, and just to be a bold person and what that does for you. So that is definitely accomplished through the Ender's Game series, and then through the Ender's Shadow series, you see the same type of thing done in more of a covert way, where people don't notice you, and people don't notice your true intentions, and you're evaluating things in the room. You're evaluating people. It sounds manipulative, and trust me, it probably is, but it's still a good read. That doesn't mean that every single place I go, I'm evaluating people and finding my plans of attack and things like that. I'm not like that. Basically in what I do, in all my things regarding life, I'm led by the Spirit, and I do what He tells me. And I don't think about those deeper things. But it's a good read. It's a good science fiction read. And if I could break down the difference here between science fiction and fantasy, obviously science fiction is going to be using elements that can be realistic in the point where it uses natural law and you can't break it. To the point where it starts violating natural law, it has now become fantasy. Some of my favorite types of science fiction books are going to be ones that are dystopian in nature, basically ones like The Hunger Games. So you're looking at maybe a futuristic type of society, but it's not futuristic to the point where technology is necessarily better. It's just to the point where money's become squandered and it's repressed to a point where it's now we're in a communist society, and what do we do to break free from that type of thing? So dystopian science fiction books I'm a big fan of. Second, I do like space travel. So ones like C.S. Lewis, Out of the Silent Planet, or books like Ender's Game are big ones that I'm into. And then ones about time travel. And I haven't really read many good time travel books. So if you have any suggestions, I'm always open. You can always email me, todd@warpzoneu.com. But I've done a lot more reading of um, the space travel types of science fiction. Then with The Hobbit, you can see that we did a fantasy read of that this year. And so the only difference between fantasy, like I said, is that you can use wizards and elven magic and white magic and things like that within your characters, because it doesn't necessarily, you can have enchanted quivers where your arrows never run out. Things like that. And I think that's kind of cool. They're very comfortable reads, and there are things that you can do in fantasy that are just comforting that you can't do in science fiction. But overall, I do believe it's two good delivery systems that you can use in the fiction world to be able to get your point across. I know The Hobbit has some pretty good themes and morals in it, and so does Ender's Game. And basically speaking, I think that when you are doing your teaching, this all coming around circle. So I'm circling the runway. We're going to land the plane now. Basically speaking, when you're developing a curriculum, you want to use some good vetted types of books to be able to allow your children to read for their curriculum. And there's a lot of good ones that you can use. One resource that I wanted to highlight is called the Tuttle Twins. They have some pretty good books out there that teach free market principles to children. And there's also some good books that will compress what they do, so you can get a thick book like Treasure Island, and you can get, like, I don't want to call it a dumbed down version, but it's a dumbed down version, right? So they take the basic storyline and get rid of all the fluff, and you can present it to a child where it's a lot shorter of a read. Maybe it'll fit better with their attention span. You can get all those types of things at Barnes & Noble, and you can get shortened summary versions of books with lots of pictures, and you can get kids into reading. I've felt that getting kids into reading is an important thing to do. You can always do it through having them watch the movie first and then reading the book and comparing the two. Sometimes I like the idea of reading the book first, because then you'll get people that were upset at the movie, whereas people that watched the movie first are satisfied with the movie enough. So opening people to think differently through long streams of cognition in terms of what a book can deliver is vital, I believe, to different types of connections being made in the brain. And once again, just through the book reading list that I create as we develop a curriculum, if you are becoming a master of your own subject matter, your kids see that. Your kids are seeing that you're going for something and that you're challenging yourselves. And probably the greatest thing is that kids are going to do what they see. They're going to want to emulate what they see. You could simply tell them what to do. You could give them a curriculum or send them off to public school and they have homework, and then you just sit on the sofa and you're on your phone with TV going on in the background while you're trying to scold your kids to do their homework. Because they don't see you doing anything. Like, well, you went to school, and you can have this attitude like, I paid my dues, it's your turn. But that's a hostile way of growing up in terms of being educational. So I would encourage, continue to go for it yourself. Develop book reading lists. Do things like this. Provide the reviews online just for your own sake of doing some type of production with, your webcam or your phone, and to just talk about it, because, it might feel rusty at first. I certainly feel rusty this morning without my coffee. But it might feel like a little rusty, like you're trying to search for the words. But as time goes on, you're going to be getting better. And your kids are going to want to emulate what they see. Just like last night, Talissa did a wonderful book review of the Lorax, and because she saw my podcast, and she wanted to do a podcast when she was done. So I said, all right, why don't you go grab a book and you can go and do a book review. So she went and grabbed The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and bless her soul, by the time it was done, we both realized that our volumes were completely off and they weren't recorded at all. So we'll let her redo hers as well. She has her own YouTube channel. It's called Talissa's Toy Town. It's like Melissa with a T. That's her name, Talissa. And so she does some toy reviews, and she's just getting used to the idea of being on camera, because as I homeschool, I'm going to be using the development of her having her own YouTube channel for public speaking, and that's going to start as soon as kindergarten. By the time she's in high school age, I mean, it ain't going to be a scary thing for her. She's going to be a confident public speaker, and so is Titus, so is any other kids that are going to be coming along the way. So, once again, I hope you had yourselves a great weekend here. We're going to be talking about this book coming up next week, Gifts and Ministries of the Holy Spirit. But once again, I didn't cover it this week. I want to give it my due diligence to really thoroughly study that thing. And I want to make sure I'm delivering it to you in a profound way. So, I hope you guys have yourselves a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday. Until then, stay safe. God bless, and go Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Sorry if you like the Chiefs, but I'm going to go for the Bucs on this one. Bless you guys.